Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back to some more bite-sized business advice. We are going to mess your brain up today. We have a totally outside-the-box conversation about optimizing your performance as a team, whether your company is yourself, or a company of 16,000 people. It comes down to the humans working in the business, how you optimize them, and how you up-level yourself along the way. So I have not a CEO, I have a chief passion officer with me today, Adolfo Gomez Sanchez. Welcome to the show before we dive in. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Brandon, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. Your company name is Gold Results, and let's talk about that. So we're talking about human optimization, human performance. Gold Results makes me think of gold medal. So obviously I know your background a little bit. I know we're going to relate this to sports in some way, but how do you describe human performance and human optimization within companies?
Right. Well, for me, it's all around, and it's kind of the question we've been trying to answer for like 30 years, right? You say, everybody wants to do ambitious transformation. Everybody wants to perform well, but very few achieve it, right? So why? And the question is why, right? It's not because of lack of interest. It's not a lack of effort, and it's even not a lack of available information out there. It's a problem of knowing what to do, and it's a problem of having the priority as on it. And like everything, I'm a big fan of having mentors. I'm a consumer of a lot of mentors, right? And the more specialized you go, the more you can really deep and develop things within your practice. So one of the big things I'll say to business is, great, you've gotten up to where you are with what you've got, but your question is, so I usually ask a CEO, just to break the ice a bit, is what's your 5-year plan to be a better CEO? I go, what? And well, that's the starting point, right? You want to transform your business, you got to start with you, and you've got to be the example, because if you think you have all the answers, so what are we going to innovate, right? If we can't question that. And that's, I think, where you have to start. And a lot of the breakthroughs come when you challenge what you think you know. And I say no in quotations because, we knew the world was flat, right? And we knew that, women shouldn't vote. And we knew, apartheid was good. I mean, all these things which you look back on now and you say, that's absolutely insane, right? Well, a lot of the practices we're doing now, I think in 20, 30, 40 years, we're going to look back and go, do you imagine? They used to count vacation days. I mean, we were talking about this before we started taping, right? A lot of times I'll have, people say to me, no, our culture is that we trust our people fully. And I'm like, great. Do you track vacation days? Yes. Well, why? If you trust people, you don't need to, right? Do you track expenses? You don't need to, right? And what ends up happening is the human dynamic. I mean, we're all people. So if you get trust from somebody and you get the opportunity to run with it, you will usually put in a lot more than if somebody is measuring you and asking you to clock in. And you get me to clock in at 9, at 5 on the dot, I'll clock out. You let me come in whenever I want. Now I have to take my son to the doctor, I can come in a half hour later. I guarantee you, if there's something going on at 7, I will still be there doing stuff. And that's been my experience myself and with my clients. So I think it's about sort of just changing the way you look at it. And Gold Results comes from the world of sports. I've worked a lot with professional athletes, especially at ATV pros. And what I've taken is the science of performance in sports, and we've modeled it, and we take it to companies, and we say, if your company were managed the way, if your favorite sports team were managed the way you manage your company, you would be aghast. It would be terrible. And there's 100 examples of that, right? I mean, the word competent is a dirty word, because that's what we do in company. We want somebody to be good at it and not step out of what they do. Right? If you look at sports, it's the opposite. 90% of your time is doing things you're not good at, so you grow. Plateaus are the bad thing, right? And we're asking you to step out. What happens in a company? You have to be good. And if you make a mistake, you may fall out of favor, right? So people are afraid. So, we want innovation. Okay, so what happens if somebody innovates and it doesn't work? Right? Well, you really have to. And very few companies actually get that right. Actually get, the chance to reward people, because you get the behavior you measure. Right. Look at the banking, the subprime crisis. Right. Well, that was a problem of measuring. I'm not measuring quality assets. I'm measuring volume of assets. Right. So you want volume? I'll give you volume. Right. Hey, your grandmother won a loan and she can't pay it back. I don't care. I get paid for volume. Right. And it's that stupid, right? That's why the mention you made about my role and my title, for me, a CEO is somebody who has to have passion around a vision, make it really clear, and then you got to get people to understand, what that means, and then let them do it the best way they can, because no one is smarter than everyone, right? So it's not about putting all kinds of rules. People are great at getting around the rules. You make rules and rigid processes, and they'll get around it. It'll just slow them down. You get them to understand what you want to do. I mean, when Starbucks started, they were really good at that. Starbucks was like, this is the third place between your work and home. Do what you would like to feel at home, right? And then people just did it, right? So you get good people. You invest the time in getting the right people, and invest the time in communicating, because companies are terrible at communicating, and executives are terrible at communicating. So really communicate consistently. Get that down. What does it mean? Break it down, and then let people do it, because people are just really good. I had a big software company, very well known, that called me a few years back and said, we want to do this transformation. Okay, and it was one division. They had like 40,000 employees. So I said, okay, that was customer first. Oh, that's great. So what does that mean for employee 15,000? I don't know. Well, then it's very unlikely that you're going to get what you want, right? You got to think about it. And companies are really naive, I find, about this. They do these wonderful transformation plans, which are all great, if you're doing an academic piece of work. But the question is, how do you transform that? And I go back to the science of performance. You take an athlete, right? Any great athlete, not only when they get professional, they keep working, but they know that it's going to take years and years and years to become a master, or to become a really, proficient professional. Anything tough takes time. It's the same. You want to be a violinist. You don't become a concert violinist in a week. You don't become an NBA pro in a month, right? Yet we think we can transform a company in 6 months. It's insane. It's absolutely insane, and it's naive, right? And so that's the first part you have to do. So we have a formula. It's got 3 big blocks, and then within it's got a bunch of variables. But the 3 big pieces just might help your listeners is, if you're going to do something like really ambitious, first you need, I call them, mindset. So it's mindset, maps, and mojo. And I'll tell you what each one means. So mindset is like your raw material. You're going to build something. You need to make sure you have quality raw materials. So that means making sure you've got your paradigms. What are your standards? How are you going to work? How are you going to, what's your culture? All the basics before you even start, because if not, it's not going to work. Right? Are you really willing to, exemplify the culture you want? Are you willing to flex and align your systems and your processes to what you want the culture to be? All of this kind of stuff. Are you willing to do it? So if you've got that, then you go into map. So once you've got your raw materials, you say, well, what am I going to build? You design it. You don't just start nailing stuff together. You design it, right? Well, that's what you got to do. And the key there is that you have to I think you need to think in decades, right? People vastly overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And again, because mastery takes time. So if you get people to consistently work towards a goal, and they understand that each piece is how it fits into the whole goal, and that whole process has pieces that are dependent, right? You don't become a Taekwondo black belt until you can have the flexibility to raise your leg, right? You don't become a ballerina until you have a certain flexibility and strength. So you can't go backwards, because if you do, what you end up happening is you end up breaking something. And that's so many companies do that. They jump forward and then they have weak links, right? And it's just like the human body. If one part of your body doesn't move properly, another part compensates. But of course, it's overstretching and ends up breaking. And that's organizations work. You've always seen that, one guy or one department that everybody goes to, right? Because it works. And they pick up the slack for everyone else. But eventually that breaks, right? And that's not scalable. That only gets you so far. So you got to have mindset. You got to have the maps, which is the design. And then what I call mojo is how you actually execute. Excellence is about daily execution. And the problem we have in our society is we think it's an end state, and it's not, right? Mastery is a road, and excellence is a road. And no matter how good you are, you have to keep going. And if not, you just fall out of the race. Look at guys like BlackBerry. BlackBerry, everybody had BlackBerry, and then they disappeared off the map. Kodak. Oh no, that's great. That's great. And they, our business is film, right? Boom, out of the market. Smith Corona, world's leading typewriter company, right? They missed the boat. They didn't want to do computers, right? So just because you've done well doesn't mean you can relax, because then you get blown out of the water. And athletes know that. Once they're good, people are coming after them, so they got to get better, right? You see a guy like Kobe Bryant, but he was always pushing the envelope. Why? Because he knows that's how it works. So if you want to just be mediocre, that's fine. But if you want to really do something fantastic, and a lot of your listeners want to do startups, and startup is by definition a challenger, right? You want to be better, you got to be disruptive. Well, then you've got to think out of the box, right? You've got to think, what can I do that others can't, and what am I willing to do that others can't, and take chances, and test, right? This is the other thing. Nobody gets it right the first time, right? When I do work with entrepreneurs, even or bigger companies, oh, well, we didn't get it right. Who does, right? I mean, Amazon started as a bookstore. They pivoted. Facebook started with a certain niche. They pivoted. The great companies, they got their mission and they never deviate from that. But how you get there, they understand you have to pivot. And I think that's part of, it's just like a great athlete. You're playing the game. It's not working. You have to know to adapt, right? Because you have a different rival, different conditions, and you've got to figure out, and then you've got to be humble. So what am I not good at? And consistently ask yourself that. What can I be better at? And a lot of times the answer to that, you don't even know, right? So you have to go to, I've been doing martial arts for 35 years. And I work with a dance teacher. Her name is Donna Flag out of New York. And she has just totally revolutionized how I think about flexibility. And I realized that I couldn't even imagine some of the things she's taught me to do, right? So you need to have somebody who's got the vision and can say, hey, think that you got to aim up here. Because if not, a lot of times you just aim lower, right? Because it's what you've seen. But you only so seek out mentors, and you'd be amazed. People will share their knowledge, and then how do I apply that? And then you piece it all together. So it's a lot of hard work. It's about never being satisfied with where you are, and then piecing it together and working forward.
That point that you just ended on is actually really interesting, and this is what I find with our clients. So typically we work with people who are 7-8 figure businesses. They're established. They have multiple employees, and when the leader invests in themselves and the leadership team invests in themselves as well, or the leader will invest in the leadership team. Oftentimes we don't invest in the rest of our team. And that's why we find that employees, and this goes back to your sports analogy, that if you ran your company or if sports teams ran themselves like your company, wow, I took that out of context, right. You would be appalled by it. Why don't we invest in our employees? But then the other side of that question too is, as leaders, I think we get stuck in this rut of developing ourselves, but just the things we like to do. So when you say you sought out a dance teacher, totally out of the box, to work on your flexibility, like, why aren't we doing that as leaders? Why aren't we going to conferences that we've never even thought of before? So kind of a two-part question of both the employees and the leaders. That's where I see people getting stuck. So how do you get us out of that loop?
Right. So let me start with the second one, because it's something I'm very passionate about, which is, think out of your lane, right? And a lot of times that cross-fertilization is where big innovation comes from, right? I mean, hospitals, you must know this story, hospitals started doing checklists in the OR because they went to see the airline industry and they said, what do they do, right? And they learned and they brought it in, right? So who cares if it's from your industry or not? Can I use it and it's valuable, right? So it's got a different way of thinking of things. And people tend to adapt to their environment, right? If you live in a cold environment, you'll see that they have got really well isolated houses, good isolated clothing, right? I live in Spain. We don't have that, right? We have to buy it elsewhere because there's no need for it, right? So go look for people who've had that need to develop that and ask them how they did it. And people are incredibly resilient. So I think you need to look out. And I think it's, often CEOs or C-suite generally think that if they are questioned, it's a bad thing, right? Whereas great leaders will step up and go, look, I don't know the answer, but I think we can do it better, but I don't know the answer. And that generates incredible, strength and culture and leverages power of everyone. But if it's like, no, this is what we're going to do, but what if this is wrong? No, I'm the leader. Then, and think about it. I mean, you've got 20,000 people, right? Or 10,000 people or 100, and I don't care. You're at the top, right? Are you really going to know better what your customer experience is than somebody who's doing that all day, right? And how do we really capture that? It's kind of insane. So going back to your question about why don't we invest in people? Because we have this outdated model, which is the societal model that it's the top tranche, the ones that are in charge, and they're the ones who make the decision, and that's the valuable ones. And a lot of companies, you tell them, if you change most of the company, they would believe that it would perform just as well. I've seen a lot of companies say, as long as we keep our executive team. And that's absolute bullshit. But that's what we're interested in. It's a self-serving bias, right? There's actually a bias where people think that people who have had the most success in a system are the ones who think it's the fairest system. Why? Because they say if it's fair, it means I must be good, right? So they're the most resistant to change it. That's why, by definition, when you want to change something, it's really hard, because the ones who are there don't want to change it because it's been good for them, right? And they fear what the new situation would look like. And we all get comfortable. We get to a certain point, and then I've worked really hard. I don't want to give up what I've got, right? But that's the worst thing you can do. That's what kills you. So investing in people means you need to understand. I think you need to disaggregate hierarchy from contribution, right? And that's where people get messed up, right? So if you look at special forces, right, the leader of a different mission is different depending on what the mission is and who's got the skill set, right? And each one's got their own rank, and maybe a lower ranking guy will be reporting to a higher ranking guy will be reporting to the lower ranking guy in a mission because that guy's got the expertise that's most critical. And I think that's what you've got to do, right? So there's times where the CEO just has to say, I don't know, you tell me, you know a hell of a lot more about this than I do, right? And give that up. But we have this image that's terrible, right? It's what school teaches us, which is also not very well designed, right? School teaches us there's one right answer, which is not true. Work alone, don't work with others, which is not right. And failing is terrible, which is actually it's not actually a prerequisite to success. So you learn all these bad things in school, and you take them into a corporate structure, and of course, then you say, why does it work, right? Well, a lot of times companies work despite that stuff.
Yeah, that's the big thing is they get away with it somehow. So yeah, school was designed to create good employees, but in today's workforce, it doesn't even do that, and it creates even worse leaders for all the reasons you just said. When I find that leaders act like that, it's their ego's just in the way, but it comes from a place more of needing to be right or needing to feel like they're superior. When a leader can put aside their ego and act with humility and say, no, I want like my team. I put my team in place so that they could tell me the answers and I can make good decisions based on our mission and our vision. That's a leader that always wins, and a company that always has that continuous development and improvement and will thrive through changes and through different market conditions. So I love that you brought that up. This episode has totally flown by. So before we end it, I put your website here or your free resource on the screen here for the listeners, your optimal performance guide. So real quick, just go over what is the optimal performance guide and who should download that.
Right. So optimal performance guide is a couple of guidelines around very high level of what we were talking about, the performance formula, which, by the way, I'm going to just take advantage that we're here. In about a couple of months, I'll be publishing a book on the optimal performance formula, which is much more detailed and people can dig into it. But this guide will give you sort of the big headings and it'll give you some ideas if you want to get started right now and you want to start thinking of what things should I structure, what questions should I ask, what categories do I need. You can start using that. Because I think if you have a good guideline and you start working with it, then you may not get you all the way, but as a good friend of mine says, the first step won't get you there, but it will get you out of where you are, which is probably the most important part.
Right? Yeah, I think that's really important. So last question before we wrap up here, Adolfo, is you've used the analogy of sports and sports teams. After somebody goes and downloads the optimal performance guide and they can look at it and have it in front of them. It's also PS, it's in the show notes and description down below. So watching or listening, it's below this video. What can somebody do? Let's say a small business, because I know you work with very, very large companies. Small business, you have 5 to 50 employees. What can somebody do to start running their company like a championship caliber sports team as of like today, right after they listen to this episode? What's the one thing they can do to start that change?
I would say take the optimal performance guide, pick out the 1 or 2 pieces that you feel you're weakest at and work on that. Work on one thing at a time, right? So it's, do I have a clear plan, right? What does that look like? Do I know what the culture is? And I know that sounds like an obvious question, but the answer in most large corporations is no. People cannot articulate the culture or the mission. Right? No, it's a great shareholder value. That's not a mission. That's a result, right? What makes you unique? A mission is something you can rally people around and get excited. So taking the time to articulate that, because as a society, we skip the basics, right? We want to get up to all the fancy stuff, but it's the fundamentals that really gets you there. And if you look at great athletes, look at Tiger Woods. He changed his grip and his swing, halfway through his career. That's fundamentals. Kobe Bryant changed the way he shot when he broke his hand, right? The best work on the fundamentals because that's why they are fundamentals, right? And again, once we get to a certain level, it's almost embarrassing. Oh, I don't do that, right? I'll go to corporations and I'll talk about role play, right? Before you go out. And people will say, oh, I'm very experienced. Yeah, well, Leo Messi's very experienced, but he still trains before a game and he thinks of his opponent, right? And you look at a guy like Steve Jobs, he was a master presenter and he would spend hours and hours and hours working on setting it up and the greats invest the time. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean, it's embarrassing to do it. So I would say put your ego away, think what you can learn, and reach out to mentors. And we're glad to always have conversations with people, even if we're not clients. So you can reach out to me or to anyone on our web, and glad to share any advice we can.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. Adolfo, thanks for coming. This has been a really, really informative episode that I think a lot of people needed to hear, but maybe didn't want to. So thank you for sharing your perspective on this.
Well, thanks for having me here. It's always fun with you.
This was great. Wherever you are watching, listening, first of all, thank you for being here. We love you. This is what we do this for you. I come on here every single day and host an episode because of the listeners, to hopefully get you out of the box you're in, help you get to that next level in business, and bring on amazing guests like Adolfo. So take advantage of the resource, the Optimal Performance Guide. It's on the screen. It's in the show notes down below. I'll have all of Adolfo's team contact info as well, his website. So make sure you go check out those resources. If you want to take your company to the next level, act like a championship caliber sports team, and achieve higher performance results. I'll see you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Thanks for being here.